There's our title screen. So we're going to start with an introduction to youth engagement overall and walk you through some steps. So I think being a SPOR, you folks know this, but here's the background anyway. We believe that it's really important to engage people with lived experience in research design. I think you see yourselves there, not all my slides. See if I can fix this up for you. Oh, there we go. So in all aspects of research design, it creates more relevant research questions that really address issues that matter to young people. We have observed that we create more successful recruitment strategies, which can improve all types of research studies, increases study enrollment and retention and stakeholder buy-in. More effective as far as funder expectations more and more, which is great news that funders and publishers are actually expecting this. We do lots of work together on knowledge translation to make sure we're getting the word out in ways that youth want and that are relevant to them. And it makes our interventions that we're testing more youth friendly. So there's not a lot of literature on the real peer-reviewed rigorous literature on the benefits of youth engagement, but we're gradually contributing to that, and we hope to be able to demonstrate that more and more going forward.
So some of the benefits that youth get out of being engaged in research are that they have a say in what the research will be about, and they're able to speak to what's actually important to them. It can be empowering for young people to try and make a difference in the sports that other youth might have access to in the future. And they're also able to develop skills related to research that can be applied to other areas too. This can be useful for young people to help build their resume and also develop their professional network.
So we're going to give a quick overview of the model of youth engagement and the different roles that youth play in the research at the McCain Center. So this is the McCain model of youth engagement. What you see is at the center is youth-adult partnerships, where we have very intensive engagement of a small number of youth, which can be youth-led research projects or projects with extensive engagement. And as you go out in the bubble, there's less intensive engagement, but there's still an important role for youth. They may have shorter term commitments. They may be just sharing knowledge to youth, which is also important. So higher levels of involvement at the lower end, lower levels of involvement at the higher end. But more youth involved at the higher end. So you're able to engage more youth in different ways with intensive engagement for a small number of youth. This is associated with the first paper. So we're here to talk about the second paper here today, but it is very much linked to that first paper that's listed that describes the McCain model of youth engagement in detail. So we've talked about some different types of youth participation or engagement in research. Traditionally, what we do is participation, where youth complete a survey or do focus groups. A lot of folks will consider this engagement. This is an important way to hear youth voices, but it's not our primary. I wouldn't say it's not our primary. We do this a lot, but it's not what we're talking about when we say engagement. We do consultation. We have a youth advisory group. We go and ask one-time questions quite often on various projects. We also do a lot of youth partnership, where we have youth on our project core teams, our steering committees. They're contributing to decision-making to understand what we should be researching and how we should be researching it. We also have youth-led projects. One flagship youth-led project has just been published at Health Expectations, where the youth were full leads of the project as far as developing the tool, testing the tool, leading focus groups, writing the manuscripts. They did it all. I was there as the consultant in this case. So there are a variety of different ways to work. None of them are wrong. There are different ways to work with people in different ways. Jackie.
Yeah, so in the work that we do on our team, we try to make space to support meaningful partnerships between youth and the researchers. Supporting these types of partnerships involve making space for authentic decision-making, flexibility, mentorship, and reciprocal activity. In authentic decision-making, youth have the ability to be involved in key decisions that can impact the direction of the project. You should have space at decision-making tables, and when they share their feedback, it should be genuinely considered by the team. Youth in the project should be working alongside other members of the project team and not just as like a separate group off to the side. When supporting youth engagement on your projects, flexibility is very important. Work with youth to understand what they need to successfully work in their role and if any additional supports are needed. When you're doing youth engagement right, it can also take more time. So rushing project timelines may lead to some tokenism and outcomes that youth on the team don't truly support. So try to have the flexibility in your projects to support timelines that also can work for the youth. It is also important for youth to be supported by adult mentors who respect them. Mentors should work with the youth so their ideas are heard and represented without being like guided or taken over by other project members. And the youth adult partnerships are also reciprocal and will benefit both the youth and the adults. So young people themselves can also experience many different intersectionalities, like identifying as LGBTQ+, First Nations, Inuit or Métis, or youth with disabilities, and many more. So today we're talking about general principles of working with youth, but working with youth on your different projects may be different depending on the youth on your team. You might also want to think about different practices or adaptations to support them. So some stuff that you can include would be working with members from these specific populations on your team for guidance, partnering with researchers who have knowledge of working with these populations, offer trainings for your team on best practices for working with them, and thinking about any support that youth may need to be actively involved. So be open with youth on your team about any specific needs that they might have. And for some populations, you also might want to take a bit of a trauma-informed approach or follow specific ethical review procedures.
So some of the roles that youth can play in research, they can play most of the roles to various degrees. Definitely in project planning, developing the research questions and objectives. We have really good discussions with youth all the time about what is important to them, and that leads into refining our questions for various grant applications and projects. They can guide the research methods used. They can support recruitment strategies. They're great at helping us understand how to reach youth like them to participate. They can support the data collection processes. Jackie?
Yeah, so part of my role, as Lisa said, is like co-developing a lot of these things, but like a lot of times it'll be like developing focus groups for many different research projects. And part of the benefit for that is when young people can co-develop these from the beginning stages, they can help researchers to create a more youth-friendly structure for these types of things. So like part of that is like I understand what might shut different conversations down or make people uncomfortable in groups. So it's also important to have youth also as the co-facilitators or lead facilitators for these, because that also brings someone that youth can relate to into a possibly intimidating environment. So yeah, we also have many different networks of youth for stuff like recruitment or for anything really. And we also will work with youth so they're able to help with the like recruitment posters as well to make sure that they're easy to understand and more attractive for participants too.
Other roles that youth can play, data analysis and interpretation. Yes, they can support with data analysis. I was talking about our youth-led project, Wellness Quest. All of the data, both qualitative and quantitative, was done by a youth member of our team. Even when it's not youth-led, they're good at helping us identify what questions we might want to analyze, what questions we might want to ask of the data, interpreting study findings. I have meetings with our youth team all the time to show them what we found and get their perspectives on it, which is always really useful. knowledge translation, lots of work there. They can help with the manuscript development in that co-interpreting and development stage. They help reach our intended population with knowledge translation materials and sharing knowledge. Jackie's working right now on a knowledge translation tool to get our COVID data out to youth. And, you know, we were talking about it this morning, and she's doing a great job at helping me. I don't know how to do this. I've got manuscripts. Jackie knows how to make it understandable in the real world. Jackie?
Yeah, so when you're doing research about young people, it's also important that you think about how you can get that information back to them. And it has to also be in a youth-friendly way. So it's important to do this so that participants can also just see what you're doing with their information. And how it can be used to make a difference for other people in the future. So like Lisa said, for like the COVID study, we took all kinds of different findings and we turned them into resources that are by youth for youth. So like different examples would be like we made an apps list, we made a resource for trans and non-binary youth, and quite a few more. And it sounds really simple, but basically just ask them what they would like to see and make it happen, basically.
So that's what we do together, but a little bit more about how you do it. How do you work with the research team members and youth partners? So setting the stage, there is training required. We have training for researchers, training for research staff, and it is co-training. We work with our youth team to develop training initiatives. So we also have a project called Innovate Research, which with a couple pubs and a guidebook that I'll point you to later, where we trained researchers across Canada on how to engage youth in research. And that comes with a full curriculum that was all co-designed and co-delivered with our youth team members. There's also training of research staff. Our youth team members trained our RAs on how to interact with staff in a randomized controlled trial, how to interact with youth, and how to be engaging and understand youth. We also had caregivers who were engaged, who trained the research staff on how to work together with the youth caregivers during a recruitment process. So different levels of training to make sure everyone's prepared to work in this way. From the paper that we were talking about, we have our do's and don'ts list. One thing on it that's really important is about creating meaningful opportunities and active participation. So not just consulting and then not really doing anything with that, but really making sure you have meaningful opportunities for youth to participate in the project in real ways and shape where the project goes. Explaining concepts in jargon-free terms. When we bring them to our core team meetings or our measure selections meetings and we're talking about acronyms, the measure selection is a world of acronyms, and we're talking about Cronbach's alphas and test, retest, reliability, and all these terms. We need to work through those and make sure our youth understand what it is we're talking about so that they can contribute actively. A good way to do this is our pre-briefs and debriefs. So before big team meetings, I'll meet with our youth team, I'll go through the agenda, I'll take that opportunity to explain the acronyms, and if there's a discussion planned about p-values, I'll explain what that means. That gives us a good opportunity to think through the directions that the meeting might take. I might make predictions on the discussion might go here or it might go there, so that they're kind of prepped for the different ways the discussion might go. Sometimes I get it wrong and we roll with it, but at least it gives us a chance to prepare. We do engage both youth and caregivers. It's important to do that separately. We do bring them together on our core teams, but if we're doing larger consults, do that separately and make sure the youth voice can still be heard and is not overwhelmed by the caregiver voice, which can happen in some situations. Jackie? Yeah,
thanks, Lisa. So you should be provided with compensation. Which is very, very important. So think about also like what youth might be getting out of participating in these projects and how they might be benefiting. So it could be money, it could be experience, connections, mentorship, or just making a difference in the system. And with that, we try to create youth-friendly spaces. So create a space where the youth actually feel comfortable and welcome. So research environments and meetings can sometimes be intimidating for people. So like Lisa said, try to avoid the like jargony stuff. And these things really will make the difference in the relationships that you're able to build with your youth team members. And on that kind of note too, it's also important to like not like steer the youth or come to young people already expecting a specific answer or direction for your project, and allow youth to have the space to guide the conversation towards the issues and ideas that are most important to them. So sometimes this can also bring up important ideas or concerns that were not initially considered or will add value to the project. And it's also important to just be transparent about how you're using the feedback from the youth. Have an open conversation about the project and what is feasible to accomplish or incorporate into the project, or what might not be possible, and consider sharing decision-making process with the youth partners so you can bring them back for more discussion.
So with the do's come some don'ts. Don't ask for feedback and then disregard it. It's easy to go out there and ask for feedback, but sometimes we just want to work in the way that researchers work, but we have to listen to their expertise and take it into account. With that goes, don't be closed to new ideas and unwilling to adapt. Sometimes the youth might suggest something that you can't do. Sometimes we have to say no, but we still make sure we explain to them why. We might have REB requirements and such, and we can't do the thing, but there might be some compromise between what it is they're suggesting and what we're able to do institutionally. And sometimes you need to take the institution on. There might be a rule that you can't do this thing, but you know that from the youth perspective, it's really important and you work with it. A small example of this is our youth have told us that on our recruitment flyers, we need to say what the compensation is or youth won't participate. Our institutional rule is you don't put the amount of money on the research flyer. Well, we've been working with REB and we've been working with our public affairs department, and we get a yes, and then we submit a new project and we get a no, and we argue it again and we get a yes. And it's an ongoing process to make sure that this is done, even though it is against the formal regulations. We have to get exceptions over and over again, because that's what our youth told us, and our youth are right. We clearly see the difference when that happens as far as recruitment goes. We've also been working with the institution for a number of years now on social media platforms. Youth want the information on social media. The institution wants to control the social media. So where's the compromise there? We work together to find ways, and we have found ways to work together to respect the institution's rules and also use social media in ways that will get information to young people in ways that they will actually access it. So don't tokenize or patronize. That goes with the rest of it. We're not just asking for information and then closing the door and not following up on it. We're actually listening, and we're listening respectfully and honestly, and we're doing something with the information, and we're discussing when we can't, to what degree we can, and how we can work together to put their thoughts and preferences into action.
Yeah, I think that also kind of leads into like my next point, which is like don't steer the youth, but work with them to explain different aspects of it. Maybe it is an REB thing, but that also builds their own knowledge and understanding of how all this works anyway. So yeah, but again, don't do it in a like, yeah, let's not do that. It's also important not to privilege any type of knowledge over another. Youth are the expert in their own experiences, and they have knowledge that is missing from the research team. And researchers have a research-based knowledge, but youth have important knowledge about real-life experiences, and we need to acknowledge that and work with that. I think we're gonna quickly go into the next topic, which is how we incorporate it all into a project.
I just want to emphasize that last point. It's really easy to think that the researchers around the table with PhDs have a knowledge that might be more important, but it is not. We're on the same page, we're at the same table, and everybody's knowledge is equally important to working together to make this happen. And it's important to really acknowledge that and respect that in order to work with young people. I think if you have that one main piece of knowledge, of attitude going into this, a whole lot of the rest will work itself out. Examples. So we wanted to bring you an example of a project that we've done with considerable youth engagement. It is called Youth Can Impact, which seems to be the words on my profile picture. I'm not sure why. But anyway, this was a major, still is a major project at the McCain Center. And when we just began this project, we were kind of at the earlier stages of our youth engagement development process. We were doing it, but not quite as extensively as we are today. And as we worked through integrating youth engagement into this study, we really saw the benefits of it. And as the study grew, our youth engagement initiative grew into what it is today. So this is a good example to show how things have played out. It is a very collaborative project. It's a multi-site randomized controlled trial with a whole lot of cooks in the kitchen. We have scientists, we have psychiatrists, psychologists, we have social workers, we have community service workers, we have youth, we have caregivers, we have nurse practitioners, we have 5 hospitals, we have 3 community sites, an additional community site that works in various locations, nonprofit contribute, you name it. We've got it all in this project, which makes it a bit of a complicated project to develop, but it also makes it a lot of fun when we're working in a very stakeholder engaged way. Right from the get-go, we developed this with youth engagement from before the grant was funded, in developing the major governing framework, in developing the grant, and then we developed a governance model that had youth woven all the way through. We have a core team that's made up of the PIs, youth co-investigators, family co-investigators, community co-investigators, and then it's broken down into different working groups working on different topics that have youth at the table. So even when we're designing our research methods, we have youth there telling us what'll work and what won't work, and working together to help design it appropriately. In the community group, we developed the intervention that we were testing, and we had youth feedback all the way through, youth co-development. We also had access to a youth advisory group that we would take specific questions to all the way through to help get more youth voices at the table. We have a manuscript currently under review right now that really digs into how youth impacted the project. Sorry. So we know that they affected the broad vision. They were co-applicants on the grant. They helped design the service pathway. They co-designed the research. They supported the implementation of the research process. They've worked with us on knowledge translation all the way through. Jackie.
Yeah, so I'll also do different types of training for the staff, for the community sites and the research staff as well. I've also led different trainings for research staff on different things to consider when working with youth in their role. And this was also co-developed by the Youth Advisory Group, which was really cool. We also supported a guidebook for the communities who are interested in developing their own youth hub as well. And we worked really hard on the youth engagement section for this guidebook. And yeah, I'm on the implementation meetings for that, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
Caregivers also made important impacts to the project. They were involved in developing the broad image, the broad vision to the project. They were co-applicants on the grant. They helped co-design the service pathway. They integrated a family intervention into our core service package in the community. They supported implementation. They trained our research staff. They were involved in some mock assessments when we were first getting started up to make sure the research staff were ready to go. They've been co-authors on manuscripts, co-presenters. They helped design a web page, website. So all of this will be detailed in the manuscript that we're hoping will get accepted very soon. As I mentioned earlier, through our Innovate Research project, we developed a guidebook. It's a pretty substantial guidebook. It's about 86 pages, I believe, complete with tips and tricks and worksheets on how to engage youth in research. The entire guidebook was co-developed with youth and researchers at the table, and we used it to present on youth engagement, to train with full-day workshops in Halifax, Toronto, and Vancouver. There's a webinar, and we hope to do more to keep developing this. It seems to be a popular tool. It's been downloaded. It's freely available on our website. It's been downloaded a lot of times and still gets downloaded on a weekly basis. So anybody is welcome to go to that link to download it directly, or pop me an email to get more on that. There are a couple pubs around that too. If you're interested, let me know. That's all we have today for the formal presentation, but we're more than happy to chat about the type of work we do.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.